Imagine yourself waking up as a historian. You put on the news and realize we are less than 4 days into 2026, and we're already witnessing what could become the year's first major global crisis. The United States has captured Venezuela's dictator and is taking control of the country. While many people are celebrating this moment, you have this feeling you are back at your graduation year. You and others are recognizing a familiar pattern, one we've witnessed before in Iraq, Libya, and Syria. Today, we're going to break down the 4 crucial stages of U.S. intervention and examine whether Venezuela is following the exact same roadmap. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this situation might not have the happy ending many are hoping for. Let's dive in. The starting point is almost always the same: an unstable state or authoritarian regime that's oppressing its own people. Before the 2003 invasion, Iraq was under Saddam Hussein's brutal rule. There were no free elections, no freedom of speech, and the opposition faced systematic torture and political assassinations. The human rights violations were severe and well documented. Now let's look at Venezuela under Nicolas Maduro. The similarities are striking. Election fraud on 3 separate occasions, with Maduro declaring himself the winner each time. 36,000 documented victims of torture, 18,000 detained political opposition members, 468 people killed during protests, over 8,000 known cases of human rights violations. But here's where it gets even more shocking. 90% of the population lives in poverty, with half facing extreme poverty. The minimum wage is just $3 per month, not per hour, per month. This has triggered a mass exodus, with 8 million Venezuelans fleeing the country. That's roughly a quarter of the entire population. So yes, we're dealing with a brutal dictatorship. No one's arguing that Maduro is a good leader. But as we'll see, that's only where the pattern begins. The second stage involves the country making decisions that directly challenge American interests, particularly economic ones. Saddam Hussein opposed U.S. hegemony in the Middle East and actively sought allies who shared his anti-American stance. The critical move? Iraq decided to sell its oil outside the U.S. dollar system, threatening the petrodollar's dominance. Venezuela has positioned itself as America's rival in South America, openly calling the U.S. imperialists based on their historical interventions in the region. But more importantly, let's talk about the oil. Venezuela stopped exporting oil to the United States and instead created supply contracts with China, Russia, and India. This wasn't just about selling to different customers. It was about building alternative power structures. Through the Petrocaribe program, Venezuela provided cheap oil to Central American countries with the explicit goal of creating an anti-U.S. bloc in Latin America. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, even larger than Saudi Arabia's. Losing access to this resource and watching it flow to geopolitical rivals instead, that's a massive strategic concern for Washington. When a country doesn't fall in line, the next step is always sanctions. Both Iraq and Venezuela faced severe economic restrictions, embargoes, trade prohibitions, and financial isolation. The stated goal is to pressure the regime into changing its behavior. The actual effect is often to devastate the civilian population while the ruling elite finds ways to survive. In Venezuela's case, U.S. sanctions significantly worsened an already collapsing economy. While Maduro's mismanagement destroyed the country's productive capacity, the sanctions made it nearly impossible for ordinary Venezuelans to access medicine, food, and basic necessities. When sanctions don't produce the desired regime change, we move to the final stage. The justification is always the same: bringing democracy, freedom, and humanitarian aid. The country is framed as a threat to U.S. national security, and intervention becomes necessary. We've heard this script before in Iraq, in Libya, and Syria, and we know how it ends.
Chemical weapons as a threat to the United States.
Fentanyl poses a chemical weapons threat to the United States.
Al-Qaeda terrorists inside Iraq.
Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere.
We can get rid of Saddam. It could really begin to transform the region.
There's an opportunity to transform the entire region.
Bringing
freedom and democracy.
Democracy and freedom.
But let's talk about what really drives these interventions. It's not primarily about human rights. If it were, the U.S. would be intervening in dozens of countries with terrible records. The real motives are geopolitical and economic, controlling resources, maintaining regional dominance, and preventing rival powers from gaining influence. In Venezuela's case, we're looking at the world's largest oil and mineral reserves, a country that had been building ties with China and Russia, and an opportunity to install a government friendly to U.S. interests. Now here's the crucial part that everyone needs to understand. After U.S. interventions in Iraq, Libya, and Syria, we didn't see functioning democracies emerge. Instead, we saw the creation of failed states. What is a failed state? A failed state is a country whose government has lost the ability to effectively govern its territory and population. Specifically, it means loss of basic functions like enforcing laws or providing justice. The consequences are devastating. Civil war, terrorism, and criminal gangs take over the country, or economic catastrophe, for example, hyperinflation, mass unemployment, and reliance on black markets resulting in a political chaos with a complete loss of trust in any form of government. Look at Iraq today, still struggling with sectarian violence and political instability over 20 years later. Look at Libya, a country that once had the highest standard of living in Africa, now torn apart by warring factions. Look at Syria, a humanitarian catastrophe that displaced half its population. So let's be clear, it's absolutely a good thing when a dictator falls. Maduro's regime was brutal, corrupt, and responsible for immense suffering. Nobody should mourn his capture. But history has taught us a harsh lesson. What comes after U.S. intervention is rarely better and often much worse. The pattern is consistent enough that we should be deeply concerned about Venezuela's future. The critical questions are: will Venezuela become another failed state, joining Iraq, Libya, and Syria in decades of chaos? Is this intervention setting a precedent for more aggressive U.S. actions, like the threats we're already hearing about Greenland? Who actually benefits when these interventions happen? Is it the people of these countries or other interests like from oil companies in the U.S.? The Venezuelan people deserve freedom, prosperity, and democracy. But they also deserve to avoid becoming the next failed state that creates a humanitarian catastrophe for an entire generation. The pattern is clear. The question is whether 2026 will break it or repeat it. What do you think happens next? Will Venezuela become a functioning democracy, or are we watching the beginning of another long-term crisis? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this video gave you a new perspective on what's happening, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos about politics, history, economics, psychology, or philosophy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.